I am in Sacramento. I work on legislation. My official title is I am a lobbyist. I run a lobbying and political consulting firm. And how many of you have done lobbying before, either unofficially or officially? Has anyone else? Has anyone ever gone to the legislature, talked to legislators or staff on issues? Okay, so you've done some lobbying. Okay, that's good. It's not a profession that we grow up wanting to pursue. It's not a thing that too formal. It's nothing that I thought about when I was younger, or had these dreams, and I didn't have pictures up on my wall. I'm going to be a lobbyist one day. It just wasn't something I aspired to. But I can tell you, really was rooted in, like I think probably many of you, life experiences, personality. Just things I've learned over the years, people who've inspired me and influenced me. Just human beings, right? At the end of the day. When we talk about mass incarceration, or we're talking about punishing people, we're talking about alternatives, we're talking about prosecutorial misconduct cases that you guys read about, or the podcast of the judge, I forgot her name now, Pratt. Yeah, Judge Pratt. These are all human beings at the end of the day. And it's funny that all these years later, that scene still moves me, because the same problems exist in our criminal justice system. That at the end of the day, too often we are short-sighted in our policy, in the way that the justice system works. And too often we're short-sighted in just treating them like another number or another case, or as the podcast, someone said, it's just like, it's judge them by on one incident or one fact, or what's in the file. At the end of the day, it's much more holistic. Okay? One of the things that I really love about what's happening here, both this class and the program, is that you're looking, and because of kind of multidisciplinary, you're looking at the whole person. And you're looking at policy approaches that deal with the entire person. That's amazing. Okay, it strikes me as an older guy now, and for whatever I understood at 10, 11 years old, it struck me then that it's about looking at the person. And I think that's the theme that you will see and understand when I talk about some of the work that I've done. And I want to get into, hopefully today, get into some of the ideas of what could be done. Okay, what are some of the policy changes that all of you may come up with? Maybe we can come up with it together. So, for the last, how many years have I been lobbying? I've actually been lobbying, what's today's date, the 19th, 20th, 19th, February? I've actually been lobbying 16 years come next week, my 16-year anniversary of lobbying. And as was stated, when I opened my lobbying firm, I specifically wanted to open a lobbying firm not to represent big oil, not to represent insurance companies. I specifically wanted to work with nonprofit organizations, and I wanted to work with advocacy organizations, and I wanted to work on criminal justice reform. I had always worked on criminal justice reform, even as in the years before I went to the state capitol. I had spent some time in the state capitol, and ultimately what I found, I was doing a lot of, should back up, before I ended up in the capitol, I was doing a lot of grassroots work. I was doing a lot of political organizing, political campaigns, all lefty, progressive kind of stuff. And at one point, a legislator really suggested to me that I go to the state capitol and I work in the capitol and I learn the inside of it. It was the most repulsive thing anybody ever said to me. I mean, why in the world would I ever want to go work in politics? That was like the worst thing in my mind, because I was kind of grassroots organizer, fight the system. Why do I want to be part of it? But then it dawned on me. I was like, I could go for a few months. He said, just go for 4 months, because I'm going to have you go and work at the Assembly Public Safety Committee. I think, did some of you read committee analysis at Assembly Public Safety Committee? That was the office. It was a sign. Well, you're supposed to, let's just see you read it. That was the office that I actually went to go work for. Okay. And it was a 4-month stint, and my job was to review every single piece of criminal justice legislation and write what I thought about it. Now, let me tell you, for someone like me who for years has been working on criminal justice reform in one capacity or another, and doing grassroots organizing around police abuse and jail reform, I was going to write an official state legislative analysis of criminal justice policy. Oh, hell yeah. So I decided I would go for 4 months. I would take back the inside information that I had to the organizations that I work with and spread it on the ground. Like, hey, here's how it really works. So that was my grand idea. Well, half of that was true. I did learn a lot about how it really works. I never went back. That's over 20 some odd years ago, and I'm still in Sacramento, as I say, temporarily. But I may end up staying. It's growing on me. But what I learned within the first 2 or 3 days, fast forward to what we're going to do today, is that there are decisions being made on a daily basis on budget items, on legislation that we will never, and when I say we, the general public, will never hear about. Okay, we hear about the big ones in the front page. Okay, but there are hundreds and thousands of bills every year. About 2,500 bills a year, actually a little bit more than that, that we will never know anything about. And the only ones that do are the ones that work in the Capitol or the lobbyists who get paid to be there. And it was mind-blowing to me, absolutely mind-blowing to me, that there are all of these decisions, especially in criminal justice issues, the issues that I cared about, that were being made with, thankfully, the ACLU lobbyist was there usually, the public defender lobbyist was there sometimes, and another organization who's now one of my clients, the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice, they were there. And occasionally some grassroots organizations, but for the most part, for about 90% of legislation, it was the legislators and it was the staff trying to decide what to do. And the tremendous impact those bills would have on everyday people, on the same people that, the person I saw in the movie, the people that I saw growing up, the people that, but for, the grace of God, I would have been in jail with my friends. The fact that those decisions were being made without input from real people and people being impacted was just extremely disappointing and frustrating. And we were talking about, to go to your question about, where is data in this? For the most part, it's not there. Evidence-based approaches, I love hearing that around the Capitol. It doesn't really happen. It doesn't. It's a little scary because we're changing lives. So I decided at that moment, probably about a week or two into it, that I probably wasn't going to leave Sacramento. I probably was going to stay. And I decided around that week or two that I was going to stay, work in the Capitol for a while, and then end up creating a lobbying firm where I could be a bridge between the folks on the ground and the Capitol. And I could kind of be the information gatherer, and I can explain, here's what had happened. I always say I'm kind of like an anthropologist, right? I go to the island and I figure out their language, I figure out their culture, their mores, their scandals, and I then take that back and try to explain to people. And trust me, when you try to explain, and you'll hear some of it today, what's actually going on in the Capitol, most people look at me like, no, that can't be right. That sounds like some weird culture. It's really crazy, some of the things that go on. Hopefully my friends who work in the Capitol, you know what I'm saying. You won't admit it, but you know. So over the last 16 years now, say a week ahead of time, one of my focuses, my main focus, has been criminal justice reform. And it has been focused on stopping some really bad, tough on crime bills. And it's been trying to do what I think all of you are doing in some capacity or another, is trying to, shift the system in a way where it treats people like people, okay? People with stories that go into the criminal justice system. Not everybody who goes to court or gets arrested for a case is some monster that can't be fixed, that, is just kind of a throwaway. And yet that's kind of how everybody is treated. It's kind of the presumption, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, probably did some other crimes too. We hear it, right? That's kind of how it operates. We've stopped a lot of bad bills, Some have gotten away from us. I obviously work closely with the ACLU and one of the retired lobbyists now, and I, who kind of was a mentor to me in some ways. We used to talk about like all the bills that we've stopped, and how terrible it would be, and then we always get mad about the ones that got away. And I'll get into some specifics in a second. I want to kind of set this up. But I've also in the last few years been able to be very proactive. And let me tell you where we're at on policy, and then we're going to get into some discussion. I would say when I started 16 years ago, and there were people there before me, obviously, working on this stuff, but at that time, it was still kind of on the back end of the tough on crime period. Okay, we had just come off of, a political and cultural environment that was very, very conservative. California had just passed 3 propositions in a row right? 187, 209, 227. One dealt with immigration, anti-immigration or anti-immigrant initiative. Then there was anti-affirmative action initiative, and then there was the anti-bilingual education initiative, 3 years in a row. Also in there was Prop 21, which essentially put a bunch of young juvenile folks into adult court. Okay, when we talk about these last few years, there have been these bills that have passed to get juveniles out of adult court and out of being charged as an adult, being treated differently. That was all trying to undo what happened 15, 20 years before through Prop 21 and some other propositions, okay? So where we're at now is when I started in Sacramento, we're coming off the heels of this conservative movement. And then there's kind of this bounce of activist legislators that came in, especially in response to Prop 187. So we had the Gloria Romero's who came in, the person who I worked for, who was kind of a political activist. She was on community college board, but she was just a lefty, beyond lefty, unapologetic about it. And there were a number of other folks who came in kind of on this, you know what, we're going to be pro-immigrant rights. And we're going to fight criminal justice reform. That's kind of where, pendulum started to swing. About 4 or 5 years ago, something in my mind kind of miraculous happened in Sacramento. It was no longer just me and ACLU and public defenders and 1 or 2 other groups kind of working in very narrow issues. All of a sudden, all of these other organizations started showing up in Sacramento, working on criminal justice reform. Hey, we're going to introduce a bill on this. We're going to introduce a bill on violence. And all of a sudden, we could have meetings with criminal justice reform organization advocates and lobbyists that would pretty much fill up this space here, maybe a little bit more. Never had that before. So we're at a very, very unique time. So we're going to come up with some ideas on what we can do as far as policy changes, okay, tonight. Hopefully we're going to be able to get there because this is the time to do it. I think the last 5 years probably the greatest criminal justice reform that has happened in decades, okay, in California, without a doubt. Part of the challenge or part of the problem is it was undoing a lot of the bad stuff that had already happened. So we kind of, we went this far and we're kind of trying to come back to the middle. It wasn't necessarily that we've gone over here, okay? What all of you are doing with kind of this, cross-disciplinary approach to criminal justice is you guys are going to be the ones, the shoulders that we're all going to stand on to carry us beyond, okay? Just getting back to neutral. We're going to start moving towards treating everybody like individuals, right? We're going to start moving towards looking at each case, not as a case, but as a person. Okay, what do we do with this individual? How are we going to handle this? That's kind of where we're moving. Okay, and I kind of take all of this time to intro because I think it's important to understand where we are at, what not just me, what I've seen, but what other people have seen, and what the opportunity really is, and why we're hearing about bail reform all of a sudden. Right, that's one thing we're going to talk about. Why we're hearing about prosecutorial misconduct and doing something about it. Why we're hearing about fines and fees being eliminated, right, for criminal offenses. Why we're hearing about diversion, right, as alternatives. Why we're hearing about restorative justice, which I got a call. I'll give you inside info, right? I got a call from an office that they're looking to introduce a really big bill on restorative justice, and they called to ask me. So I'm looking at the statute, and we see that there's this language here that says the purpose of our criminal justice system says X, Y, da, 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 and it says restorative justice in there. Do you know anything about when that got in there? And I was thinking, yeah, that was about 4 years ago, and it was about a room of a bunch of advocates. I didn't lead the charge, but I was in the meeting, and we all decided we got to very quietly sneak in restorative justice into the statute, and we did. Okay, so those are the kinds of stories I'm going to talk about, so we can understand how it really works. But we're going to take all of your experiences and your thoughts and ideas, which you've been learning through these lectures, and come up with what we could do. Okay, so that's my kind of short intro. I'm sure I skipped something in there, but don't worry, I'll get to it. Now let me pull out. No, I'm just kidding. My conferences. Are there any questions before I get started? Okay, questions for all of you. Mass incarceration. Okay, that's one of the things, how to reduce mass incarceration. It's right here. Roadmap. Have you guys all read this book? This is
Two chapters for most.
all right, have you guys read any of this? Just, yes, you have. All right.
Listen to the podcast, the people who are in the chapter.
So let me ask you this, and this I'm going to go through a series of questions that just demonstrate kind of what happens in the Capitol, okay? And how complicated it can actually be when, in my mind, it should be very, very simple. Okay, just remember that. I think it should be very simple. It's very complicated. What's mass incarceration? Give me a definition. How do we know that we have mass incarceration right now? Give me statistics or give me something. Okay, where? Okay. In our state prisons? Okay. State prison? I got it. Yeah, I know I had somewhere. State prisons. Okay, where else? Is that it?
There's lots of people in jail.
Jails. County jails, right? So how will we know that we have successfully ended mass incarceration? What's the marker?
Per capita.
What would it be?
When we're more on par with other modern nations in terms of per capita incarceration.
Okay. And what is that?
100 per 100,000. What we were before we went crazy in the 70s.
Okay. What do you think? Right? This is how we measure that we have mass incarceration. We're above this. 100 for every 100,000. What's the split? Does it matter? No. Does it matter? One answer.
I would say it does, because realignment has pushed people from state prisons where conditions are in California generally better down to county jails where people are supposed to be held for shorter terms.
Okay.
Visiting is more restricted.
Everyone know about realignment? Everyone does? Okay. Good. Good.
Good luck, right?
So let's say we're above this, but it's all in county jails. Is that mass incarceration? Anybody have a law school degree here? Tell me if I'm wrong on this. First day of law school, they say, we will tell you what the answer is to almost every question. Depends. That's why lawyers are paying out. That's what we're taught. Depends. Depends. All right. When Jerry Brown came forward with realignment, right, shifting people from state prison to county jails, is massive, massive change. Huge change. One of the questions was, does it matter? I don't know. Depends. Depends on what's going to happen, right? Typically, the conditions are better. Typically, you're closer to your family, your friends, right? Typically, you're closer to where you're going to be when you get out. Okay. Doesn't matter. Are you going to be in for a shorter period of time? You're going to have more services. Okay. Depends. Part of why I bring that up is that in the legislature, every time there's a question and an answer, it's usually followed by 4 more questions. Okay. That's part of the challenge. We're going to get there in a second. Okay. All right. So that's mass incarceration. And let's say, what are the main drivers of mass incarceration? What's the main driver of mass incarceration?
Poverty.
Okay. I have a different thing in mind. Let's put poverty. Capitalism.
Politics.
Politics. Police. I like all these answers, by the way.
Systemic racism.
Good, good. I have one I'm going to add. People commit crimes. I mean, let's be honest. That's part of it. Right? And when you hear that usually from the right, you know, if someone's on the right, it's fine. But people say, like, well, if you don't commit crime, you don't have to worry about it.
But what if those crimes are like passed and defined as a crime, but like, I don't know, what if not everyone agrees with what crime is?
Kiara, very good.
Right.
Yeah, Kiara, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Kiara.
Good. So, we're going to go through this and then I'm going to throw in examples from the legislature so then we can start putting this together. First thing is, what exactly is a crime? Who determines that, right? It's the legislature. The legislature writes what's a crime. Okay. One of the reasons why I'm drawn to the Capitol, why a lot of my friends, when they come to the Capitol, they can't leave, is that it's pretty amazing that you're setting up the statute. You're defining things like what the hell is a crime. Okay. I'll give you a quick short story. Had a case 2 trying to think, was I just out of law school? Was I still in law school? I think I was still in law school. I had a case where I was working with an attorney and I was certified to practice in courts with that attorney to actually handle a preliminary hearing on a felony. It was drug trafficking, okay? Drug trafficking. Anybody watch Narco? What are the big drug, shows out there? There's a bunch out there, right? Narco, what else? What's the one with the high school teachers, the meth guy?
Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad, okay. Drug trafficking sounds really terrible, right? Here's what the legislature defined as drug trafficking. Being in possession of drugs and moving. That is also included in drug trafficking. Just movement. Now you might say, okay, this guy's kind of crazy. Yeah, I am. But the reality is that's what the statute said. And that's how it's interpreted. Pure movement.
No intent?
No intent to distribute, no intent to sell. All of that's in the statute, but it has one word in there that said transport. Now, anyone who studied law, the appellate courts and Supreme Court, they say there's somewhat of a presumption that, the legislature knows what they meant. When they adopted the statute, they know what they meant. They took everything into consideration. And had they not wanted to just include transport, they would have said transport with intent. So it means transport, meaning you have drugs, any amount, you move, you can get the same. One of the drug trafficking statutes, I should preserve. There's some higher drug trafficking statutes, I don't want to mislead. But there's a very big felony on drug trafficking that has distribution, all those other things, and it has the word transport. And for years, people were being charged with drug transportation as a felony. One of my early cases, I represented somebody who I'm from the Bay Area, and it was night out, and he was partying with his friends, and he was driving, and they had drugs, allegedly, but they had drugs, to say. So they pulled him over, Mexican guy, of course, and then, the cops question him, takes him in, they find some drugs. Drug transportation. Get to the prelim, we read the report, we're like, well, wait a minute, I'm kind of it's good to be naive and young and like kind of dumb, right? Because I'm talking to the attorney, I'm like, the police report says drug transportation, and yeah, well, because it's transport. Okay, he's in the car and all that. I said, didn't say the car was moving. Seriously, I'm not a rocket scientist. It's just like, doesn't transport movement. What it said was the officer came around the corner, saw the car come to a stop. I was like, well, what does that mean? So, loser case, typically. So the attorney goes, you know what? You get to handle the cross-examination. So I was like, let's go. Let's do it, right? I'm young. I'm fired up. And I had about an hour and a half cross-examination, probably of him, of the officer, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes cross-examination, going over whether or not the car was moving when he came around the corner. Okay. First of all, think how ridiculous it is that the taxpayer money is going to me cross-examining an officer on whether or not when he came around the corner, the car was moving, the car was stationary. And that is the difference between a felony with significant penalty and a misdemeanor. Okay? The guy said, no, I was parked there in front of my friend's restaurant, which was true. That was an actual fact. And I was with my buddies, and we were getting ready to go somewhere, but we were just sitting there. We had just been drinking, came from the bar, sitting in there talking, and yeah, we had drugs on us. It's a misdemeanor. Prop 36. You get diversion on it. Officer says, no, I saw the car move. Well, was it moving? Did you pull him over? Because it says here, you pulled your car over and walked over to the car. So did you, on the same block, like within 50 feet, how's it moving? End of the story is, the officer said, actually, he never clarified it, right? So it was one thing that we did. They actually never clarified it. When I was cross-examining him on something else, our strategy was to focus on the search and get him thinking about the search, okay? Because you didn't have to notify the prosecutor that you were going to challenge a search as being unconstitutional. It used to be you didn't have to give them any notice in the preliminary hearing. They changed that law afterwards, I think, because of our case. Because it was like a year later, and that office sponsored it. But so we decided, you know what, let's do all this questioning and then get to the point of him say something about the car being parked when he came around the corner, because it said that in the report. Okay, so we did that. Now all of a sudden, close down the case. Oh, no more questions, Your Honor. Oh, what? No more witnesses? You don't have any witnesses? I know, we're good. They're like, what the hell's going on? What's going on? It was hilarious. The DA was freaking out, and ultimately we said, okay, Your Honor, we're good because you should dismiss the case because it didn't say the car stopped. And that's the requirement. Car needs to be moving. The DA wanted to reopen. The judge was like, take it in chambers, came back and was like, sorry, Mr. DA, you didn't mention anything about, or DA and your witnesses didn't say anything about the car being moved. We won that case. Now, it's the most ridiculous story ever because it's true, and it's a waste of fucking time and resources. But it's this. It goes to the first question, what is the crime? Should never have been charged with transportation in the first place. And even if he was driving, who cares? It's whether or not he was distributing or selling or whether it was scales or who cares? Why? Who wrote that damn thing? Did they do it intentionally? Who knows? A few years later, when I was up in the Capitol, one of the best things I ever did, and I can't remember build numbers now because they recycle them every year, but one of the best things I ever did was, you know, poetic justice, as they say. I ran a bill, we sponsored a bill, and all we did was add the words transport with the intent to sell. Put that in the statute. We eliminated hundreds, if not thousands, of prosecutions in California by adding those words. Why? Because we're just kind of common sense, right? That's what we're dealing with in policymaking sometimes, is figuring out what's screwed up and then fixing it, okay? To get us to the point where we are reducing mass incarceration. And that's why I said sometimes it's things that you will never hear the front pages. You'll never hear about that bill. I don't remember what year it was. And on that one, you can still get drug possession, but because of California laws, Prop 36, you're probably not even getting county jail. You're going to get drug treatment, although there's no bed or there's no treatment programs, but you get drug treatment and it gets wiped off your record if you go through the treatment. So that cut off mass incarceration a bunch right there. A lot of other big things happen as well. One of the things to take away is that as you approach the question of what kinds of policies will make a difference and where to focus your time and energy and resources, okay, as far as the data and studies, which are absolutely necessary for the policymaking process, is don't skip steps. Start from the very beginning. And it's okay to admit people commit crimes. Did that guy have drugs? Yeah, he did have drugs. And yeah, that's a crime. It's not a felon, shouldn't be a felon. All of these other things are absolute drivers as well as mass incarceration, without a doubt. We're going to talk about some of those in a second. But don't forget to start at the beginning. Should it really be a crime? Let me think of a couple of other real quick examples. God, I know there's been a bunch the last few years that decriminalize something. Well, I know we're talking about like possession of marijuana, obviously. That's my talk about these other ones right in front of me. But there were others. I can't think of them right now, but I'll talk about that. But part of the policy-making process is asking the first question, well, what exactly is the crime?
Because I was trying to get back here in time.
It goes to understanding the story of individuals. Well, this person was getting high with his friend, but is that drug transportation? Well, you know, common sense says no. So what does the statute say? How is it being interpreted? Holy cow, this is ridiculous. Okay, there was a case of a guy, I swear this is a real case. Not my case, but a friend's case. Went to a party, took a cab home, didn't pay the cabbie because he didn't have money because he was loaded. The cabbie called the cops. Cops came to the guy's house. He was sitting out on his in front of his front porch. Cops started talking to him. You got to pay the guy. They end up arresting him. They search him. They find drugs. They charge him with drug transportation because he took a cab from the party to his house. Honestly, one of my friend's cases. Okay. So those are the types of things when we talk about mass incarceration. Sometimes it's very simple. Okay. And I think dealing with policy, and I've said about 4 times because it usually takes 5 to really sink in. Sometimes it's just being very simple and straightforward. What's already there. Sometimes make the biggest changes. Okay. Sometimes we overthink it. Okay. So that's one. I got 5 minutes before break.
As long as you want.
So let me go through a couple of other things. So that's mass incarceration. We have some of the drivers.
I mean, I would say other things that I talked about
Yeah.
adding to mass incarceration are the things that we sentence people for and the lengths of the sentence.
Absolutely.
So those are, and that's why there are a whole bunch of people locked up in prisons who are aging there for things they did 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Absolutely. Oh, one of the other things that passed during that tough on crime was 3 strikes.
Mhm.
Okay, 3 strikes. We'll get to that in a second. I was just gonna say, it made me think of something on lengths of sentences. One of the hardest things to change in Sacramento, the length of sentences. What? Clifford or Cliff? Cliff, you're a state senator. Where are you from? Where do you live? What city?
Oakland.
Oakland. You are the state senator for Oakland right now. You just got elected. Well, Oakland's a little different. You just got elected by, let's say you won by about 2%. Okay. Actually, I'm going to switch it. You're in the state assembly. How many assembly members do we have? See,
A
there are,
lot.
there are numbers that you will take away from this. There are 80 state assembly members. You guys are now smarter than about 98% of those. Okay. There are 80 assembly members. There are 40 state senators. Okay. You won by about 1 or 2% over your Democratic opponent. You're both Democrats. So probably Democrat. And in the assembly, you have to run for office every 2 years. Okay, every 2 years, which means you get elected in November in the general. Your primary, and they moved up the primary now this year to March, right? So now you've been elected in November. You've been sworn in January, okay, to take office. January 1, let's say January 1, 2020, let's say. You are up for re-election in 2020, 2021. Right, 2 years, you got elected in 2019, take office in 2020. But your first primary election will be about 14 months from the time you get sworn in. So you're in re-election mode already. Does that make sense? Did I go too fast on that? Okay. So 14 months later, you're already in election mode as a primary challenger. Your challenger is going to take you on. Like, I lost by 2. I'm going to take Clifford down. I'm going to win this time. Okay. Now, someone comes to you. You're put on public safety committee. I'm your committee consultant. I'm like crazy lefty. Let's reduce the sentence from 8 years down to 1 year. Let's do it, or 2 years. You want to get reelected, Clifford? Probably. I imagine, right? There's a whole lot of people spend money on you to get elected. What are you gonna do? You gonna support that bill? Because you got, let's say is it Anna? You got Anna over here who lost to you by 2 points. Anna's like, oh, okay, you reduce sentence. Let's say it's on rape. How are you going to vote on that, Clifford? You're going to vote to reduce rape from 5 years down to a few months. Remember what happened to that judge over in Palo Alto or whatever, Santa Clara County, right? You know what I'm talking about, Judge Pesky? Yeah. What are you going to do on that? Depends. Don't answer. All right. So changing lengths of sentences is very, very difficult. Okay. Changing the crime is kind of how you get there, right? Drug transportation, right? We didn't change drug transportation, changed the crime. Okay. Petty theft. Anybody know the definition of petty theft? It's theft of property. What's the value?
Less than $400.
You said 400?
I'm from a different state, so I don't know.
Just throw a number out. Okay, they don't know.
There's like a 100.
Oh, from where you're from? What state? Oh, I think they have degrees of petty theft. Yeah. Michael, what'd you say?
800.
800? It's like Price is Right. You want to go over or higher? No, Price. Let's make a deal. You want to go above or over?
400.
How much?
400.
400 million. All right. Answer is right now 950. Wasn't always. It used to be 400. Till ACLU and myself, with the help of others, we passed a bill to make it from 400 up to 950. There was also a proposition recently that expanded that 950 across other crimes. So why is this a big deal?
So it's more expensive, so it's easy to maybe rack that up and then petty theft.
True? Exactly. That's why we wanted to raise it. It hadn't been raised in I forget how many years.
Cell phone is over that.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. But it's also a big deal because it's the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony. Before realignment, I don't know, realignment somewhere. Before realignment, you're probably not going to go to state prison for it, but it's a felony. Just has different consequences for you, right? So we just changed the crime. We actually changed the length of sentence. It's the same crime, but you're still in stuff. We just kind of moved it around a little bit, okay? Sometimes that's what you have to do. Change the crime itself to get to the length of sentences, okay? Teach you guys the inside how to really do it without Clifford having to lose his reelection and be the first Democrat to lose after one term in Oakland, right? One more thing on lengths of sentences. The last couple of years, legislature has actually taken an approach to get rid of some mandatory enhancements.
Yeah.
Okay? Make them discretionary. Okay? Commit a crime. Oh, there's some other circumstances. We're going to give you some extra time. Right? That's the enhancement, basically, what it is.
We don't know anything.
So instead of changing the length of the sentence, we just said, oh, instead of it being mandatory, we're going to make it discretionary. It's up to the judge. Okay? State Senator Bradford had a bill, I think it was 2 years ago, it was a firearm enhancement. Made it discretionary. I think that's what it's called. Okay? Another way to change the length of sentence without changing the length of sentence, just give the judge the discretion to decide whether to add some years to the underlying charge or offense.
Does the CCPOA oppose all of these or some more than others? Or
I'm going to get on the back half of what my talk on.
okay, sorry.
Great question. Okay. We're just talking about some of the things that are going on in the legislature now, and then we're going to get into it. We'll take a quick break in a couple minutes, and then we'll jump into how you guys start seeing some of the policy changes. All right. So that's another way to get the sentences. 3 strikes. 3 strikes, okay? Everyone understand 3 strikes? Now, one of the major changes, what we, and I say we, California voters did, 3 strikes. Okay? One of the worst laws in California, one of the biggest drivers of mass incarceration, right, besides all of this, 3 strikes. 3 strikes says, originally, you commit 3 felonies over what time period? You commit 3 felonies, serious or violent felonies. Let me start again, I'm tired. I'm on Vegas time. You commit 2 serious and violent felonies. Then you commit a 3rd felony of any stripe. You get sentenced to, anybody have the answer? 25 to life. That was the 3 strikes law. 2 serious or violent felonies. The third, any stripe, 25 to life. Now, within what time frame? Anybody know? Good answer. Not the answer, but good answer. What's your name? Kim. It doesn't matter. Your entire lifetime. You want to talk about how we got to, what's the per capita right now?
700.
I didn't know. One of the major drivers was that. Okay. Case I had, 18-year-old kind of tough guy in the neighborhood, just graduated from high school in the summer, no job, no prospects for college. Dad's locked up, not an excuse, but just is what it is. Okay. He's hanging out at the local 7-Eleven down the street like I used to, different 7-Eleven, but same concept. And he used to kind of get in little scuffles. Okay. Within the same week, he knocked down a kid, took his chain, knocked down an old homeless guy who was asking for money, took 20 bucks from him. Okay? Before 3 strikes was ever passed. 3 strikes did not exist at the time. He was 18, he was an adult. Okay? Although you can get a strike as a minor. His attorney says, okay, we'll do probation, he'll plea out, 2 felonies, whatever. Probation. Right? Whatever. I think that's what they ended up doing. But he pled out to robbery. 2 robberies. Because robbery is only theft, including petty theft, with force or violence. Okay, there's other things, but mainly force or violence. Okay? So technically he used force, knocked the guy down, took the stuff. 2 robberies. Not 2 strikes, because 3 strikes didn't exist. A few years later, 3 strikes gets passed. A few years later, he gets felony. Gets arrested for felony. Non-violent felony. 25 to life. They're like, well, he has a record of a history of this and that. So he's got 2 violent felonies. He was an 18-year-old punk who knocked over somebody, pushed him and took his chain, pushed him and took his money. $20. Like barely, not even close to that.
And
I mean, it's
he
infinite.
wouldn't have been charged with felony, he pled to it.
That's right.
Just to get it done.
That's right. Yeah, he didn't plead to a strike because it didn't exist at the time. One of the biggest changes we made in California was we reformed the 3 strikes law. Okay, required, and this is a big change. Would have changed his, I guess. A lot of people still would be affected. Change 3 strikes to say the third has to be serious or violent. Okay, still 3 serious about felonies your entire lifetime, but at least the third has to be serious or violent. Goes to my point of that the last few years we've had some major changes, historic changes in California. But all it is really bring the pendulum closer to the middle as opposed to swinging it to another side, right? Some new and fresh ideas, which is really what you guys are trying to do here, okay? So another way to reduce sentences was they changed 3 strikes. So now if you commit a 3rd felony, you're not going to get 25 to life. You'll just get what that one is. Well, you might get double because it's 3 strikes. Long story how it works, but I'm doing this over and over to give you guys a different way to look at how to approach mass incarceration, right? I'm taking you down the path of what legislators think about, okay? Now, can we do it in a way that doesn't look so bad, okay? Can we do it in a way that I'm not gonna get that mailer, right? I used to work for Gloria Romero, she didn't care, okay? When she ran for state senate, she ran against another Democrat, progressive district. They had a hit piece mailer on her about how she wanted to let criminals out. And it was like a pop quiz. You know, Gloria Romero voted for this, wants to do this. They were frankly factually all correct. She did vote for all of that stuff. She still won because people were starting to shift. But the reality is, if I brought in legislators in this room and we said, hey, do you want to reduce mass incarceration? Or I brought the right legislators, they'd raise their hand. And we say, okay, well, how are we going to do that? Can we reduce lengths of sentences? Maybe a couple of hands go up. The rest go, well, it depends. Okay. One thing that you all can do to help, and this is what we'll get into, we'll take the break now, is using your expertise and developing expertise and using your, coming up with evidence-based approaches to start thinking about it in this way. What are the crimes? What are the length of sentences? What are different ways we can get out of this? All of these are true, okay? And we can talk about how we can change the drivers and poverty and, politics that would kind of come into here, right, of what they're going to be able to do, who they arrest, police arrest, those types of things. But to get to the nitty-gritty of what happens in the legislature, you got to come up with ideas that are, I think, there should be research behind them, like we were talking about, but also that are acknowledge what the politics are and acknowledge that the pathways of getting here is going to be sometimes looking at the crime, making an adjustment, finding a different way to get to changing the sentence. Judicial discretion is a good way. Changing the dollar amount, things like that. There are ways that we can get to cutting this off. In the legislature, we don't have the benefit of having like this, whatever hour or two we're going to have tonight, is probably more conversation that I've had about what we should do about criminal justice reform. I mean, most continuous time that I will have all year. I will not have this long of a conversation with a legislator, a staff member, or anyone else of relevance. This is it. If you combined all of my conversations with a single legislator all year long, it still wouldn't be as long as I'm going to speak tonight. Okay? It's fast and quick. It's 5 minutes. It's 3 minutes. It's 10 minutes. It's a hearing. It's a way to put in the analysis. Okay? There are ways I influence it. I stick the example of the guy driving, or in front of the bar, that becomes part of the official analysis. People look at it and go, oh, that's horrible. Yeah, there are ways to influence it, but it's it's very fast paced. And it's really, the polar opposite of what all of you are being trained to do. to come up with the evidence, come up with the research, in-depth discussion. I promise you, the reading that you have for tonight, the legislators who deal with these issues have, one, probably never read or listened to the podcast or read the book, and probably never read this much about it, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 who really into these issues. The rest, they get this. I'll close on this. They get this. What does the bill do? Okay. Who talked about? Oh yeah, Ignacio came in. Oh yeah, CCPOA came in. Who's supporting of it? Oh, okay. Who's opposed to it? Anybody in my district? Oh, okay. What's the chair going to do? Oh, okay. Am I be voting with everyone else, or am I by myself? Okay. All right. So I said it could be a very short discussion of how things work. That's the reality. We're going to talk about that more on the next segment. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the policies that I've worked on. And we're going to have a discussion about some of the policy issues that all of you are interested in. And we'll start identifying where some of your policy interests might fit in some of the discussions in the Capitol right now. Let's give that a shot. But what I want to do is set up a little bit of a spectrum of the criminal justice system, and then we'll figure out, where we can make some changes, right? Or where some of the ideas or issues or concerns that all of you have, where they fit in. So I'm just going to start at the beginning, right? Where's the beginning of, if we're talking about mass incarceration, not where it all starts, because obviously it starts with, socioeconomic, all the other things that lead to the fact that somebody gets arrested. But let's just start with the police arrest somebody, right? Let's talk about the process, right? So, because I know, don't raise your hands. I'm sure many of you committed crimes. I have. I just didn't get arrested for most of them. So, it's okay. Police, that's the first stop, right? Police arrest somebody. Then what happens? Let's say if it's a felony.
What was that?
Say it's a felony. Just say for this.
Next work goes to the district attorney. District attorney determines whether or not to charge.
Good. Before that's right here. Let's start here. Police arrest you, go to jail. Say it's a felony right now. Say you get arrested, what's today? Tuesday, you get arrested Tuesday night. When do you go to court?
Thursday.
48 hours, right? So you sit in jail possibly for 48 hours before you get to what they call arraignment. Okay, I want to simplify some stuff, but let's just say 48 hours, right? What if you have a job to go to? Is that Angela?
Oh, no.
Can't go. Well, the good news
Bail.
is, huh?
Bail.
Yeah. The good and bad news is, right, we're going to talk about bail reform. That is part of the title here. Part of the good and bad news is that, at least for this 48 hours, if they don't release you right away, you could post bail. Now, bail good or bad? Depends. It depends. Bail essentially is, does someone want to tell me? Call on somebody. It's fine. I don't expect you guys to know. Ashley, Brant, anybody over there know?
I mean, I can guess. But
Yeah, just guess.
like
It's fine.
the amount, depending on the crime, how much it'll cost for them to be released from jail.
Yep, that's exactly it. Okay. There are bail schedules that are set by at the county level, okay, not at the state level. Okay, these are state crimes. Everything we're talking about is state crimes. Just keep in mind, not federal. But for state crimes, right, the laws that were passed in Sacramento, commit any of those felonies, bail is set at the county level. Okay, and this will be important as we talk about bail reform. Who sets the bail schedule? So in bail schedules, when I talk bail schedules, it's literally like a menu. Okay, you commit this crime, here's your bail. Okay, you commit this crime, here's your bail. Who sets that? Anybody know? The courts. More specific.
Judge.
Close. Judges. The judges set. Okay. This will be an interesting point later when we talk bail reform. Judges set the bail for each county, and it's just a dollar amount. That's how much you're going to pay. Now, why is that? Why do we even have a bail system? Oh, Ashley, do you
I have a
look at that?
question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
You said it's set per county, so it's not depending on like the crime.
Yes, each county has kind of the menu of
Oh,
crimes,
okay.
but each menu is specific to that county. Okay, so you may cross county, commit a crime in one county, commit a crime in another county, have different bails. Okay, sometimes they're similar. Why do we even have bail?
Try to get people to show up for the court date.
Right, but legally, let's talk legally for a second. But yeah, that is part of it, right? They're gonna release you, but there has to be some assurance you're gonna come back, right? That you actually show up to your court date, okay? But why don't they just hold everybody? They're like, you know what, we're not gonna take any chances. Were you putting your hand up?
You
Doubtful?
haven't been convicted of a crime yet?
Oh, that's kind of cool, huh? In this country, you're kind of presumed innocent, right? That's kind of a cool thing, like in theory, right? You're absolutely right. You haven't been convicted of a crime, so you have to be released, okay? It's in the California Constitution. I mean, there's other federal protections as well, constitutional protections as well, but it's actually in our California Constitution that you have a right to bail, okay? Which is kind of a weird thing, because it doesn't say you have a right to be released, it says you have a right to bail, okay? It's an interesting twist. Why we are where we're at on bail reform. But it's a good and bad thing, right? You got to go to a job, boom, you pay bail. Okay? Okay? Because you are presumed innocent, right? You're released. And the main thing you put up money, the idea is that you'll show up to court whenever that first court date is, and we'll get into the other court dates in a second, but at least for the first court date, right? And then you have a chance to change bail amount. How much do you pay for bail? So let's say it's a $50,000 bail. Let me pull out my wallet with my $50,000. A lot of money.
10%.
10%. Who do you pay that to? Bail bondsmen. Okay. Everybody kind of know how bail bondsmen work more or less? I'm calling somebody Ashley. I'm a bail bondsman. I don't know where they get their money. There's a lot of questions about that, but it's a different story. That's for a different conversation. Bail company, you come to me, say, okay, I'll put up the $50,000. You give me 10%, okay? You can negotiate it down sometimes, depending on, you hear the ads. But, typically about 10%. Give me 10% of this, give me 5, and I'll put up the 50,000. But you better show up to court, okay? You better show up to court. So that's what happens. So it's 5,000, okay? And if you need to get to work the next day, bail bonds will go down, process the paperwork at the jail, boom, you're out in a few hours, okay? Off to work. So is it a good thing? Well, it's a good thing to get back to your job and back to your family, right? But you're now out 5,000, or most people don't pay the full amount. Used to. Okay, so that's that. Then we get to an arraignment, and they say you actually show up. So that's a good thing. You're supposed to show up to court. You have a question, Angela?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Like, we'll be up here at this
No, it's fine.
Has there always been this middleman bail bondsman, or was there a point that it became so expensive that it was necessary to have them?
Good question. That's actually a good question. I don't know if I have the answer. I have to think about how long bail industry's been around.
Bail was lower than. So it's just like, why would it be?
Sometimes policy making is so simple, right? Hold on to that. We'll come back to that. Absolutely. That's what drives me nuts at the Capitol. It can be so easy. So let's fast forward to the arraignment. They say, okay, yeah, you're being charged with X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, robbery, whatever, violent crime, whatever it is. And then they say, okay, come back. We're gonna have a preliminary hearing. Won't get into what that is, but preliminary hearing, and then, but your bail's gonna stay at 50. Okay. Now let's say you couldn't post the 5,000. Okay, you're still in custody. Okay, just a little thing. If you post bail, then they'll kick your court date out. Sometimes more than 48 hours. But if you're still in custody, you got 48 hours to get to court. Okay. Now, when we talk about mass incarceration, our county jails, and forgive me, it's not top of my head right now, but our county jails are filled with people there pre-trial. Keep that in mind. I want to say in most counties, it is more than 50% of the folks who are physically in the county jail are there before they have been convicted of a crime. Presumed innocent. Okay.
But I'm in jail. Because I'm presumed.
Presumed innocent, but we got to make sure you come back. You got to make sure you come back. You show up to court, so you got to pay some money. Okay. Go ahead.
Have they ever thought
Kiara.
of a system to
You're like 5. You're like down
log a
here.
database to monitor them without getting into bio control and security?
Did you do the reading for tonight's class?
No.
Okay, I can tell. We'll get there. All right. So let me kind of move through quickly here. Get to arraignment. Let's say you couldn't pay the 50,000. You're in custody. You can't get out. Okay. So before we get to preliminary hearing, that's like evidence. We won't get into all that. But you ask the court, you say, you know, 50,000, I can't afford it. Judge, I want it lower. Who has the power to reduce it? The judge. The judge. Okay. Now,
You can
I'll
get
tell you-
released on ROR, right? You
Yeah.
can just get released on ROR.
yeah, on your own recognizance, or that's the other option, right? How often is that going to happen in a felony? It's tough sometimes. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. But it's the judge's call. Okay. Sometimes the judge will be like, hey, wait a minute. I'm going to raise your bail. Whoops. Okay. It'd be harder to get out. Now, somewhere in here, somebody said, Michael, really, Michael, you said something about the DA, right? So somewhere in here, the DA or the prosecutor in the county office decides what the charge is. Kind of important because remember what I said about the bail amount, the menu, right? More serious it is, the bail's higher. The DA has a lot of power, okay? The case I told you about where the drug transportation, the DA could have just said, I'm just going to charge him with drug possession because even if the car was moving, he wasn't selling. DA charged him with drug transportation. He has a lot of power. So we go back to mass incarceration right here. One of the pressures, one of the drivers are the decisions made by prosecutors. Okay, not just the crime. Which crime do they choose to charge based on the facts? Okay, makes a big difference. Makes a big difference in getting out at the beginning. Okay, judges set the bail schedules. Individual judges can increase or decrease bail or release people on OR. Okay. When bails are high, let's think of a situation, this happens all the time. And we said more than 50% of most counties, they're there pre-trial. Let's say it's 100, let's say it's 150,000, can't pay. Got to get ready. I'm a defense attorney. I'm like, I got to get your case ready. I can't go to trial immediately. We got to waive speedy trial because I'm not going to be ready. We got to fight this because you're looking at, let's say it was my guy who's looking at 25 to life. You're looking at 25 to life. I can't be ready in, 45 days. No way. Too much at stake. So you're going to be sitting there. How long? Weeks, months, years? All of those are possibilities. So we have a lot of people sitting in our jails, essentially spending time, serving a sentence for a crime they haven't even committed, been found to have committed, because they can't pay bail. I look at it a little differently. I don't say it's because they can't pay bail. I say because we don't let people out immediately when they get arrested. That's why I say bail is kind of good and kind of bad. Because it's good you have a right to get out, but it's bad if you can't afford the way to get out. So why don't we just let everybody in? Makes sense, right? You said that, right? Just let everybody in. Because they say, oh, people might not show up to court, right? Then you get a warrant, then you get brought in and all this stuff. The other thing that changed a few years back in statute, but also in a recent initiative, a very tough on crime initiative, was they added the words, it's public safety or risk of public safety. Well, they put in the words public safety. Bail amount is also based not just on whether you're going to show up to court, but also on public safety. Okay? Let's say, who haven't I called yet? Rachel. No, let's go Kylie. Oh, both of you committed crime. Okay? Co-defendants, exactly. There you go. Okay? And I just forgot where I was going. Public safety. Both come in and the judge goes, well, I think, Kylie, I know her, this and that. All right, I'm going to drop your bail from 150 down to 25. Go call, Michael's bail bonds, you'd be okay. Now, Rachel, all of a sudden, let me look at her record, okay? She's a little sketchy. She's got a few things, got a few arrests, she's got violent crime, she's got a bad grade in this class, so she punched the professor, I'm thinking, I think she's a little bit more of a risk to public safety. Has nothing to do with whether or not she committed the crime. Has nothing to do whether or not she's going to show up to court, whether she's a risk to public safety. Some of the lawyers that I talk to think that's one of the biggest problems in the current law. Okay, is that is a factor. Okay, remember that we're going to talk about that in a second too. The difference between getting out and not getting out could be what the judge determines whether you're a risk to public safety or not. Okay,
They're kind of like David Copperfield.
they kind of what?
Kind of like David Copperfield. They must be magic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. See if I can do this in 20 seconds because I love telling examples. Represented someone, I'll tell you the facts on 3 layers. Someone arrested for assaulting a peace officer. Couldn't get the bail reduced. Sounds pretty bad, right? Assaulted a peace officer. Let me add another layer. It was a woman. It was a woman who was happened to be her 70th birthday. Happened to be a grandmother. Was she at a bar? Was she had a bar fight? Or the officers came? No, where was she? She was at the state fair in Sacramento. What happened? Her grandkid, who was 5 or 6 or whatever, at closing time decided to run back into the exhibit to go see the pigs. Honest to God, wanted to go see. She went after him. Oh, did I add in that she doesn't speak English? She only speaks Spanish. So the security guard there, the Cal Expo security guard, said, "Hey, man, you can't go." "Oh, I gotta go. My grandson." He took off in there, and he's like, "It's closing time. It just closed. It was 5:02. Literally, it was 5:02. They closed at 5 or 6:02, whatever it was. She's like, "I gotta go." "Hey, no, you can't go in there." "Hey, get off me!" Boom! She's arrested for assault on a peace officer with injury because he said he got a cut on his finger. I'm not even making this up. This is a case I had. Talk about bail. It was on a Friday of a 3-day weekend. She was arrested Friday night, which means there's no court Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. Bail was $150,000. 150,000. She worked at Campbell's Soup for 35 years. Never missed a day of work. Family called me and said, "Can you please call her boss? She doesn't want to get fired." I had to wait to get to court to try to get her bail reduced. Tuesday. Luckily, the boss didn't fire her. The DA fought me. Why? "Well, you know, it's a felony. It's an assault peace officer. There's an injury." I literally said in court, because again, I'm crazy. You guys have seen it already. I literally said, I said, "Just for the record, I just want to be clear that the DA is claiming that my client, so-and-so, who just turned 70 over the weekend, and let me describe her, 5'2", 105 pounds, grandmother, is somehow assaulted a peace officer and caused injury. And that's why you don't want to reduce bail because she's somehow a risk." Let me put that on the record. Okay. Eventually, I went in the chambers, talked to the judge who I knew well enough. He dropped it down. She started to post bail, not even OR. Okay. Point is, that's the kind of stuff that happens. Okay. So, well, we get into that too. So, here's the thing. Let's say it's a big case. You're looking at 10 years, 20 years. You're going to sit in prison prisons, county jails for a long time. Okay, long time before you get to trial. Okay. Then we get to trial, and trials go all kinds of wrong. I don't have time to talk about that tonight too much. There's a lot of things that go wrong in trials. Do we get the right person? Sometimes. Do we get them for the right crime? Not always. Do we get the wrong person? Absolutely. Okay. So I say all of this to talk about 3 things. I'll do it as quickly as I can. Bail reform, SB 10. Okay. There's a committee analysis that was handed out. If you haven't read it, read it. Talk about SB 10, and this is one of the most complex issues and straightforward issues that there is. Okay. 2 years ago, a couple of legislators, ACLU and a number of other organizations, introduced a bill to reform bail. Okay, bail reform. Can't give you all the insight, I'll give you a little bit. Okay. What they wanted to do was replace, the grand idea was to replace bail with, who was saying it, just, you know, some alternatives, right? Right? Okay, come back, but you got to do X or Y. You got to wear an ankle monitor. You got to check in. You got to do certain services that maybe will help people with some of these other things, with poverty or mental health or public health, you know, social services that you have to do while you're waiting trial. Okay, but at least you're going to get out, because the argument goes that if people with a lot of money get out, people with not a lot of money don't get out, and that is a major problem in our criminal justice system. I agree. Absolutely. That's the bail schedule. I mean, that's the problem with the bail schedule. Okay. So SB 10 was introduced in its original form to get rid of that and have these alternatives. Santa Clara County has a pretty good program where they look at the individual. They look at, okay, what's he or she, what are her circumstances? What can help? Is she really a risk not to show up? Well, she goes to school, she's got a good job. Okay, what circumstances of the arrest? Okay, do X, do Y. Okay, if you do these things and come back to court, you don't have to post bail. Okay, that's what the bill is going to do. Pretty damn good. Okay, pretty damn good. Now, the Democrats control the legislature. I'm going to go back. How many assembly members?
80,
How many senators?
40.
Very good. How many? What's the population in each of their districts? Because I can't remember. Otherwise, I think it's like 890 and half of that. About 450, something like that. So, couldn't get enough votes to pass the bill in its form. Okay. Democrats have a majority, and actually a supermajority now. Pretty good supermajority, 2/3 of both houses are Democrats. Okay, and for a little while it was 2/3, and for a little while it wasn't 2/3 when this bill was going through 2 years. Could not get a majority of Democrats to vote for it, couldn't get a single Republican to vote for it. Okay, in that form. Got stuck. A lot of behind the scenes negotiations, a lot of discussions. Okay, I was not part of most of those. I was kind of second level discussions, talking with people who were in the room. Okay. Fast forward, SB 10, almost 19 months after it was introduced, we find out, some of this I can say, find out that it's going to be amended. There's a deal that's been cut. There are going to be enough votes for bail reform. Going to get rid of money bail. Okay, sounds like a good thing. Depends. Okay. The final version of SB 10 was released to the public on a Saturday. Okay? They made kind of special arrangements for that. It was on a Saturday. Posted online. The bill was going to be heard. The date's right, is that right? Was it Tuesday? Anyway, it was going to be voted on 2 days later. Whatever it was, 2-3 days later. There's a new law now, it's 3 days, so it has to be 3 days. It's going to be voted on 3 days later, but could not be amended, not enough time. Because it was the last week of session. Okay, that makes sense to people. It's the end of the legislative year, so everything had to be voted out that week or it's dead. And there's a new proposition that says bill has to be public for at least 3 days, so can't amend it. That was it. Take it or leave it. I heard about it for about 2 weeks. There was a deal, but they didn't release it until that Saturday before they were going to vote on it. Okay. Turned out a little bit different. Turned out that it was, and again, depends, good and bad. It was going to get rid of money bail. No more money bail. No more money bail. Okay, no more, like, I can't afford it. Oh, I should back up. There was a provision in SB 10 early on. It retains some portion of bail because it's in the Constitution and there's a question of whether you can get rid of it without a 2/3 vote or without going to the ballot. Okay. I'll tell you how they got around it. Clever. So there was bail in there, but it said bail could only be set at an amount that the individual can pay. So not by crime, not the menu item. It's like, oh, okay, how much can Anna pay? How much can Kiara pay? Oh, Ashley, okay, you got all kinds of money, so you're paying more. One by one, individualized bail schedules, but no more than that person could afford, and that would ensure that person to appear in court. Okay, kind of a cool concept. There are cases in front of the state Supreme Court right now, and federal courts right now, looking at that specific question. Should that be the cap on bail? It should only be as much as you can pay.
Who determines how much?
The
they can
court.
pay?
The judge.
So do they look at like income and their?
You have to present information. The defense attorney would say, well, here's what you can pay. A lot of questions unanswered on that. That's what was in the bill. At the end of the day, the final version of SB 10, very controversial, at least for me. The individualized bail was out. Money bail was gone, completely gone. And instead they said, okay, we're going to set up risk levels. If you are, remember we're talking about risk in public safety? Risk level has nothing to do with whether you committed the crime. Risk level has nothing to do with whether or not you're going to show up in court. Huh?
Other people committing crimes?
Right. What is your risk level? Okay, coming back or committing a crime. The good news for us criminal justice reform folks is that for the low level folks, you're going to get what someone said OR. You're going to get released. Okay, it might be some services. You might have to promise to do X or Y. You know, and this is important here. You might be required to go speak to someone about certain social services, mental health services, things like that. You know, kind of get services to people who might need them early on. It's actually a really good thing. Okay, and a lot of county jails are doing that now, or a lot of counties are trying to do that through probation, through early on in the process. So that's actually not a bad thing. But then there's mid, and there's high. The basics are, if you're in the high risk category, you're not getting out that 48 hours. You're going to court. So remember we talked about, we talked about 48 hours, you might lose your job. If you're in the high risk category, you're not getting out. One of the questions I had was, well, I had this woman that worked at Campbell's Soup. I literally asked one of my friends who was working on this. I said, she worked at Campbell's Soup, was charged with assault on a peace officer. Felony, violent felony at that. Okay, could have been a misdemeanor, but they charged her with a felony. That high risk? The way SB 10 was drafted, because I won't quiz you, because if you read it, you would know the answer. Probably, because it said any violent misdemeanor or felony would be in the high risk category. Okay, a little bit of a shorthand, but for the most part. Okay, so you at least have to get to court. And then you get to court, the judge can say like, I'll let you out with some services. They can do that. So that's good. But that first 48 hours, a little risky. And that's when I would bring up, well, that might not be good for certain people. Because at least, even though it's super expensive, at least there was some way to get out. Maybe, if you could afford it. Not always, that's the problem. Layered on top of that was pre-trial. That was just before arraignment, just that first 48 hours. And I'm going to skip some of the details just because there's a lot in there. But pre-trial, if you're high risk, and there's some other factors, there is a presumption that you will be detained pre-trial. Completely. Okay? Completely. Now I'm giving one side of the story. I will give the other side in a second. Okay? Because I did not like the final version. If you had of course I'm going to give the worst example, because that's what you do as a lawyer. If you have a DUI, okay, and you are, I forget what the level was now, 0.5 or 0.20, I forget what they put in there. I'll look at it. But if you have a high BAC, high blood alcohol level, you are put into the high risk category. And if you are there in the high risk category, and say 5 years prior you had one of the enumerated offenses, you are presumed, you will be held until pre-trial. Okay. Now you can argue with the judge about it, but there's a presumption that you will be held until trial, whether that's a week, a month, a year, 5 years. No way out. Not even if you say, hey, I got $150,000 in my pocket, I can get out. Nope, can't get out. Now it's a narrow, the trade-off was there's gonna be a narrow group of folks who can't get out, or a harder time to get out. But more people will get out on the front end. That was the trade-off. That was the negotiation, okay? I call it preventive detention, okay? Preventive detention. Now there's more details, like you can challenge it, there could be a hearing, but if they let you out, and then the DA decides, that you should qualify for high risk, and they come and arrest you again. I mean, there's a lot of layers to it, good and bad, okay? But I'll just spare you some of those. But the bottom line is preventive detention. Now, who pushed the preventive detention? This is the politics, right? Of all that. Who came up with this concept of preventive detention? Again, this is my commentary, so just, qualify it. It's not what everybody thinks. This is my thought. Some of it is factual. The idea of preventive detention came from an entity called the California Judicial Council, or Judicial Council of California. Anybody know what that is? Our court system. Our court system. Now, who sits on Judicial Council? A handful of county executives, but mainly judges. Who is the head of Judicial Council? The Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. Now, there's debate on whether she personally was involved in negotiations. I've heard that she was, which could complicate the fact that she's overseeing some cases on bail right now. Just an observation, but let's say she wasn't. Say it was her staff. The courts, the judges who are in charge of bail, and this is where it's weird because the bail industry makes this argument, I kind of saying the same things. It's a little complicated because I don't really agree with the bail industry. But the same folks who set the bail schedule, the judges, the same ones who can individually reduce bail and let people out, or just let them out on OR. Their entity, not the Judges Association, but Judicial Council, was the one to push this approach. I said, well, it's good, it gets rid of money bail. My perspective, mine only, though, it's only one of many perspectives, and I have had very strong but respectful disagreements with some of my friends on this, and colleagues. The cases making their way through the Supreme Court, I think, are going to end up finding that bail cannot be set at a schedule. It has to be individualized. It has to be based on how much that individual defendant can pay and reasonably pay, that's the word, reasonably pay, and show up to court. Okay, that's what I think the cases are going to go. Having talked to some friends that are litigating it, having read some of the opinions, that's my thought. The Judicial Council and the judges, if that were to happen, would lose all control. They wouldn't set the bail schedules. They wouldn't be able to determine whether to increase or decrease bail. They would be required to set it at a level that that person gets out.
There's no discretionary like there was before to increase it if they really thought someone was a safety threat, or they would just take it away completely and maybe help.
Well, because it's going through the courts, it's not a policy that's been adopted. It's a standard. Now they can't, I think the way that the earlier opinions have talked about that there can be exceptions, but it has to be like, yeah. And in fact, I forget what the language is, but there's a court decision that says specifically that keeping somebody in custody should be only in very limited, very, I forget what the exact words of the legal opinion, but in the most narrowest of cases when that happens. That should be extreme when the government holds you even though you haven't been convicted. So I think that's where it was going. My commentary is I think the judges and the Judicial Council and the Chief Justice were like, we're going to lose all control of this. So let's retain control by creating risk levels. We get to then, we being the judges get to take everybody and decide, okay, yes, you are low, yes, you are mid, yes, you are high. And if you're high, we're going to decide if you get out. Oh, by the way, one of the factors they get to look at in SB 10 is safety risk of public safety. So, is SB 10 better than current law? No answer. I debated with my friends a lot about that.
It depends.
What if they're
It
both
depends.
bad?
It really does depend on the case. Huh?
I don't know, what if they're both bad? They don't, neither of them seem to really
That's a
solve
possibility.
the problem.
That's a possibility. The reason why we ended up here, just to remind everybody, is that they couldn't get the votes. So I kind of understand they got what they could get. And I do understand that there are going to be a lot of folks that are going to be impacted on the low risk or low level offenses. That is going to help a lot of people. But let's go back to what we talked about earlier as far as, the number of people pre-trial. Like, is this the right fix? Is it not the right fix? Now, where are we at with SB 10 right now? It was passed and was signed in September. It's supposed to take effect. They had delayed implementation, so it's supposed to be October of 2019 taking effect. Anybody know what happened? So the bail industry, we have a lot of money, and we're going to be put out of business, cobbled their money together and decided to file a referendum. In fact, the day after the bill was signed, they filed the Secretary of State a referendum, which means they collected signatures, and they were able to collect enough signatures to qualify a referendum on the November 2020 ballots, which will put to the voters the question, should SB 10 be repealed or not? In the meantime, legally, SB 10 is put on hold. So it is not in effect. So we don't know what's going to happen until November 2020. So what happens between now and then? Same old same. Okay. I bring this up because it's an intersection of poverty, it's an intersection of employment, affordability, presumption of innocence. It's where our system goes totally screwed. Okay. But at the same time, let's say Clifford's running for re-election or running for election the first time, and he was a judge. And he comes in, I bring in my sob story Campbell soup person, and I'm like, hey, can you just like waive bail? Because, you know, she has no money. It's a liquidation bill. Blah, blah, blah. They're like, okay. Lo and behold, turns out grandma decides to get out and starts beating up people. Turns out grandma's actually one that likes to get out and like start a lot of trouble. Turns out she really is kind of a bad woman. Why in the world did Judge Parker let her out? Okay? Those are the realities, right? Okay? We can make decisions in this room on what policy should be. Okay? But then the ones that have to make decisions, they have to weigh out other things, right? Judges, even though I kind of was a little critical of judges, they have a tough job too, right? I mean, look at what happened in the Pesky, right? In the Stanford student, right? The rape case where they gave him probation or whatever they did. And that judge got kicked out. The one thing I always tell my friends is like, what's interesting about that case is that was the recommendation of the probation department. He simply went with that. As I understand, the judge simply approved the recommendation from probation of what the sentence should be. So he didn't go off on his own. Now, I don't know if that's factually true, but that's my understanding of it. But the fact of the matter is, there are all these people in decision-making positions who have their own risks, professional risks. Okay. So if we go back to what we started off, mass incarceration and all this other stuff, this is all just getting out before trial. It's not even being sentenced longer. It's not even being convicted of the crime. Is it the right crime? Is it the right person? This is all just getting the hell out of the county jail before you go to trial. And I said most counties just fill them up. Two things. I'm going to shift gears unless there's questions on the bail stuff. I think it's fascinating, and I don't think there's an easy answer. Okay, I think there are easy approaches, right? Reduce the bail schedules, right? That's what you said. Just reduce the damn bail schedules. That's what I'm talking to my clients about. Well, just in the meantime, reduce all the bail schedules. So there are simple things like that might be done, but then you were, well, what if it's too low? We're going to let people out. So some people still can't afford that. So it's still based on how much wealth you have, and that's not fair to poor people. Absolutely, that's all true. Why don't we just let everybody out? Because they are presumed innocent. Well, then they go out and commit another crime, right? I think even in the podcast they asked the judge, did anybody ever go out and commit another crime? Oh, no, never commit another crime. Yeah, that's the risk, right? You let somebody out who was arrested for a violent offense. They go out and commit a violent offense while they're waiting for trial. Everyone goes like, why the hell are they on the street? And then, do you want to tell any of your friends at a dinner party when they go like, yeah, they went out and killed somebody when they were waiting pre-trial because they let everybody out pre-trial? You're like, yeah, that's because everyone's presumed innocent. That person should have been out there. Do you want to be that one to say that? Of course not. Think the legislators want to be that person to be like, oh yeah, well, we supported that because complicated. It's complicated stuff. Let's talk two last things. Probably way over time. Because I promised I would, and I probably should. So on mass incarceration, let's talk about the DAs. Sometimes they get the right people, sometimes they're in too long. Sometimes they get the right people, sometimes they're in too long. Sometimes they get the right people, they're not in long enough. Okay? Sometimes there's more work that needs to be done in the jails and the state prisons so that we help folks when they get out, right? So they don't come back in, right? That's where a lot of, probably all of you are interested, or like that part of the process. And that's really, really key, because recidivism is huge, right? We can kind of predict who's coming back. The biggest predictor as far as folks who go in, if I remember correctly, are folks who are arrested as juveniles. That is the largest predictor or easiest predictor of who's going to be arrested as an adult. They've already been arrested as a juvenile. I think a lot of folks need to be there. Because again, I'm not really smart, but if that's the highest percentage of recidivism, maybe if we reduce that, we'll have fewer people. I don't know. It seems pretty simple to me. But let's talk about when the DA gets it wrong. The wrong person, okay, we were talking about, because I do some work for, and last time I spoke here, I brought a friend of mine to speak who spent 17 years in state prison for a double murder committed in LA. Okay, he spent 17 years, gave a life sentence. Oh, it was life sentence plus 50 years. So they were going to make sure he wasn't getting out for double murder. Turned out, didn't do it. But it took 17 years and some really crazy circumstances, which you will see in the movie that will come out in a couple of years. I say because it will come true.
He's coming to speak.
Oh, he's coming to speak, right? He is incredible. He is incredible. I brought him to speak with me last time. I was like, oh, I'm supposed to speak, but basically I'm going to have you speak, but you did. He's incredible. Took 17 years for him to get out. Now he's spending a lot of his time working on pushing policy changes in the legislature. So he and I team up quite a bit. I just talked to him on my way over here. And he also started an organization called Exonerated Nation to work with the wrongfully convicted when they get out. Because it's a different kind of mental health issue when people come out of prison when they didn't commit the crime in the first place. Okay. And they have other struggles with employment and housing. I can tell you this, you guys will be the first to know, other than OB. There are going to be some bills introduced this year, anywhere from 1 to 3, that will cover 3 things. If you've been wrongfully incarcerated in California, you will get free community college education, free education at CSU, free UC, okay, if you can get there, we can get you there. We passed a bill last year to give the mental health services, well, social services, gate money. One of the things I don't know if you talked about, there was you wrongfully, if you're convicted of a crime, they give you $200 when you come out of prison, right? You're wrongfully convicted, they give you 0, not even bus money. So we just changed that. You get $1,000 now to come out. You get automatic CalFresh, so you get access to food, and you get a couple of other things. But the bill's coming this year, free education. It's going to be free mental health services, which is going to be a little different than what's offered now. Thanks in part to the work that's been done with some folks through here, that we figured out that this would be a really, really important issue. And then the third part is going to be, and this is going to be really huge, it's probably the leading problem for exonerees. It's going to be free housing, for a housing voucher for at least a year, 6 months to a year. We're talking about that right now. Okay, those are 3 bills that will be introduced, I think, at the end of this week. That I'll be working on with Obi, so ask him about that when he comes. But what happens when they get it wrong? One thing that I worked on the last few years is on bad DAs. I have friends that are DAs. There's some very good DAs. They're very committed to their job. They need to protect the public. Trust me, if somebody, beat up my family or attack my family, yes, I would call the police. But I want the prosecutor, it depends, because that's how I am, but most people would understand that. So I support prosecutors in many ways. I think they do a crappy job a lot of times. I think oftentimes they go too far. And I think that they're working in the system that is screwed up, so it's not really their fault. Okay? They're wrong. But sometimes DAs do bad things. Okay? There have been a number of scandals where DAs have withheld evidence over the years. Okay? Not just in California. OB was one of those. They withheld evidence that that the main witness was actually somebody who was getting paid off by the cops. Okay? There was evidence that they were actually protecting the identity of a unofficial brothel for police officers. Oops, the DA didn't provide that information to the defense before trial. There was actually a shell casing from the firearm that had been collected, but didn't tell the defense. Oh, by the way, that shell casing didn't match. The firearm, all these other things, but it was withheld. So what happens with bad DAs? Did you know that up until 3 years ago, it was not illegal for a DA to withhold evidence? And I mean illegal, it was not a crime. Not a crime. Possible ethics violation, possible, what we call discovery or just evidence code violation, but no real remedy. So, can't be sued. There are cases on that say they can't be sued. They have immunity. Wasn't a crime. So you can withhold evidence, somebody get convicted. Spend 17 years in prison. Oops. That DA. The DA in his case actually got promoted through those 17 years. There was a breakthrough case in Texas, 60-minute story about the gentleman. Sorry, I can't think of his name right now. Oh my God, I can picture him too. The National Innocence Project handled this case, and the DA had moved up to become a judge over all those years. I think he was in 22 years, killing his wife, and burning down the house, and killing his wife. Yeah, you know what you're talking about? Oh, that's not him. Michael, think about it in a second. Unprecedented, they went out and arrested that judge. He was the DA of the case, but they went out and arrested a sitting judge. Okay. And I forget what they got him with, but they got him with a misdemeanor. He had to do 10 days. The guy spent 22 years in prison. The reason being there was no crime really that they could use to go after him. So for probably the only time in my professional career, probably personal life as well, I supported and helped draft a new law, a bill, new policy to make it a felony for a DA to withhold evidence. Okay. Everyone told me I was crazy. They said, there's no way it's going to be passed. What they didn't know is I spent 2 years getting ready. 2 years prior, I ran a bill that would provide a jury instruction to where you have to inform the jury of any incidents in which the DA withheld evidence. Just inform the jury what they want. Right? That was the first bill I ran. Didn't get that one signed. But we started educating the legislators, right? The 120 legislators. They started saying, oh, okay, well, why are you doing that? Well, people withhold evidence. Oh, no. The next year we came back with another version. Trying to think what that one did. That one was you have to report DAs to the state bar, and they could be kicked off the case clearly, but the entire office could be kicked out of a case because in Orange County it was the head DA who was telling all of his DAs to withhold evidence, and there were some really bad cases down there. There was one case in particular. I think they found like 300 incidents of prosecutors withholding evidence. Pretty bad. It's systemic. And in the process, I was educating the legislators about it. And you know what happened? Because, sometimes I'm like a broken clock. If I say I am correct. We spent 2 years educating legislators, and it finally got to the point, because I wasn't pushing that bill. They came in and be like, so they get reported to the state bar? Yeah. Is that it? Is that all your bill does? Oh, yeah. But don't they get reported now? It's not mandatory. Well, they were all, well, that should be like, well, it ought to be a crime. I had legislators telling me it ought to be a crime. Little did they know that's what we were going to run the next year. So again, once in a while I'm right, not always. Not too often. Occasionally I'm right. So it took us 2 years of doing work to get to the third year to say, well, okay, we're going to make it a felony in California for a DA to withhold evidence. People told me, oh, you'll never get any legislator to author it. Okay. They were right. I couldn't get a legislator to author it. The very last day, there's a deadline when bills have to be introduced. The deadline's this Friday, so I have some work to do tomorrow. Some other bills. Change sentences. I got the one legislator who, I love her, she's great. She beat an incumbent Democrat. It was the wildest story. She raised, I forget what it was, like $2,500. She beat a sitting assembly member. She held tamale sales. She made tamales and sold them to raise money. She barely, not that she barely spoke, she speaks with a heavy accent. I say that, it's just a fact. Wonderful person. Got made fun of because of that. But somehow she won the election. It was like a warning shot to all the legislators, like, hey, don't assume that you are always going to get reelected. She won. She was up for reelection. She was going to be taken out because all powers that be in the Democratic Party were putting money behind the opponent to bring the guy back. She agreed to carry her bill because she was like, what the hell do I have to lose? I'm probably going to lose anyway. I'm going to fight for something. So she did. And people made fun of me. Oh, you had to go to her. Patty Lopez. I will always thank her for that. So, you know, Patty Lopez.
Hmm?
I said, damn right. She's doing it. Oh.
Just a lecture.
The bill that people said would never happen, got on. It passed unanimously in both houses, Democrats and Republicans.
I guess I have to go.
Because we spent 2 years. That's not because I was right, but it took me 2 years to be right. And by then, staff and the legislators were like, holy crap, you're right.
20 minutes.
Did I have the evidence? I had some stories,
We'll go in 20
right? We brought enough cases, right, that we could show, look at all the times it's happened. But I also had the real easy thing to show, which was it's not a felony now. It's a felony for police officers to,
Okay. John,
what did I say, to destroy evidence was a felony. That was part of my argument. It's a felony to destroy evidence for peace officers. Why wouldn't it be a felony for DAs? I didn't tell them that I actually wrote that law too. So I guess twice I created a felony. With the ACLU, when I was a staff person, we were like, hey, let's make it a felony because Rampart scandal in LA, they arrested officers, but never charged them with destroying evidence because there was no crime. We created that crime. So there you go. You build on things. That passed with
Patty
Obi's help.
Lopez win?
Patty Lopez lost. The assembly member was actually a friend of mine who then got his seat back. Was only in office for a few more months though, because he was accused of some misconduct and so he had to resign. Patty Lopez tried to run again, but she didn't get reelected. But she tells people how proud she is about that bill all the time. I get calls from people like, hey, I talked to her and she was giving an interview about it. One of the stories is that when you're coming up with policies, figure out what's going to make a difference. Okay, figure out where you can help. Okay, and again, a lot of your work, and if I have 10 minutes, do I have 10 minutes? Okay. Figure out where you can make an impact. It doesn't have to be everything. It's not going to fix everything in one fell swoop. It's just not going to happen. I wish. You can make some big chunks. But whatever it is, whatever perspective you have, whatever you think can be changed, figure it out. Put it out there. And think about how it works in the real world. Okay? The biggest thing I had to learn when I showed up in the Capitol was how I was always say, you know, they say put pen to paper, but, you know, feed on the idea. Like, you got to figure out what is it really, right? It's like, oh, we want to reduce mass incarceration. Well, how do you do that? I listen to the podcast. They talk about mass incarceration. I haven't read the book. Listen to their podcast. Talk about fines and fees and the cycle of warrants and all that. Absolutely true. I've seen it, been there, represented people. But I didn't hear, that's one part of it. But how do we change everything else? You can't do it in one fell swoop. What I encourage you, and I want to hear your ideas in a second, is to always think about the big picture and always think about where, you know, all the different factors at play, and be creative. Okay, be creative. Okay? Think about how all the different, you know, if you want to push policy, you want to show up to the legislator's office. How are you going to convince him or her that he or she should do this and not worry about re-election? Right? That's what I had to do. And as chief of staff, I made a pact or made a commitment to my boss saying she was going to remain as lefty as she was, but she wasn't going to be, you know, but she was still going to be politically relevant and stay in office. That was my challenge. That's what I was hired to do, to figure out how to make her retain her political progressiveness, because that's how I'm a left of left. But it does no good if she's left of left and not in office. Okay. And that's what we were able to do. It's not easy. We don't like it a lot of times, but my job, I have to respect it. I understand legislators are going to act that way for self-preservation. I don't fault them. I just know once they're out, someone else comes in, so it doesn't matter to me. I just need their vote. I don't care what they're, you know, I don't care who it is. I've had legislators vote for my bills who've never met me, who've never read my bill. They just, you know, I've worked the staff enough, or I figured got enough other legislators to support it, whatever it is, you find ways to get the result. So put feet on it, meaning you might have broad ideas, but figure out specifically what that idea is and figure out how a legislator will actually support it. How do you package it so they'll understand it? Okay. Okay. I'm smart enough to know what I don't know. Okay. I brought in Obi Anthony when I was trying to get my first bill passed because I couldn't get my votes. I was very convincing. I'm a very good advocate, but I couldn't get the last votes. You know why? Because I didn't go through it. I brought Obi, who sat there face to face with these moderate Democrats who didn't want to vote for our bill. This is our first year doing the prosecutorial misconduct. And he said, I spent 17 years in prison because the prosecutor had evidence I was innocent and didn't turn it over. Let me tell you my story. Not only do we get legislators to change their vote, they went out and recruited other legislators to vote in favor of it. Okay? So you got to figure out how do you bring life to the policy.